Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make the brick stitch beaded earrings using the information that I learned from one of the books that I purchased, which is in the video description where I showed you the beading needles that I purchased. So today we're going to be using the John Bead Good thread. This was in the Michael's haul video, 100% bonded nylon. So we're going to use that in black because I am going to be using some black beads. So I have my nylon thread in black, and then I have the 11O seed beads, which I showed you in the video of my Michael's bead haul, and also a needle in size 12. So these are the 11O seed beads. These are very full. So I'm just going to be using the scoop to get some of these black ones out. I'm going to put those in there. And that's what the container is for, just so my beads, so I don't have to sort them later if they won't mix together. So I'm just going to put like several scoops of the black in there. I may need additional ones to do both earrings. The red for the bottom fringe part down here. My cat wants to play with the microphone, so if you hear some cat noises, he might have decided to turn on the other microphone and be in this video on the audio. And we will need orange as well because we're going to make a pumpkin. So I'm going to get some of the orange out container. Just put those over there. So we will need a bit more orange than the red. So just put a few scoops of that in there. You'll need a pair of scissors to cut your thread with, which I just grabbed fingertip to fingertip with your arms spread out to straight, like you're making a T, and that's about whatever your height is. So that's usually what I use. Then to thread this needle is I use grid paper. And I use the grid paper to make my pattern, and so that's what I'll use to go by to count the beads, so I know where to switch colors. So first, we're going to add 4 of the black 11O seed beads, and we're going to do the ladder. We're going to go all the way down the thread and leave about 4 inches at the end. So I'm not going to measure it. I'm just going to say that's about 4 inches at the end. So we have 4 beads on here. So then to start the ladder, we'll go back up the same way. So you can see this is the end where I've left the 4 inches. And this goes to my needle. So this is the other end. So I'm going to go back through the first 2 the same way. So I'm pulling that back through the first 2 the same direction as I put them on the first time. So the short end, not the needle end. And then that will pull them side by side. So now I have 4 beads in a square shape side by side. And so I'm coming out this way. So I'm going to go back through the 3rd and 4th bead the opposite way. So you'll want to pull that tight so you can start that ladder shape. So it should look like a little bitty square. So next we'll only add 2 beads. So we're doing 2 rows at a time, and we're going to make this first ladder is going to be 17 beads wide. So we'll pull the next 2 down, and then we're coming out. So we're coming out through the bottom we're going to go back through the 2 beads that are beside it through the top. I'm going to go back down through those 2, which will come out the bottom of the 3rd and 4th beads. And then we're going to go back up through, so see, we're at the bottom because this is the bottom where we've got our tail. And we're going to go back up through those 2 we just put on. We want to make sure everything stays nice and tight though. Continue that same step, adding 2 beads, pulling those down, going back through the opposite side of the 2 beads that were added before that. Pulling it close, and then go back through the 2 beads I just added. So we're going to continue this until we have 17. So we'll have 2 rows, but we'll have 17 columns this way. We're going to add 2 beads. Pull those all the way down till they're next to the beads we did in the last one. We're going to go the opposite way through where it came out last time. 2 beads beside that. We're going to pull that till it's tight. And we're going to go back through those 2 beads we just added. And now we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on the bottom, I'm going to do this until I get to 17. You have 17. So there's 2 rows because we're doing 2 rows at a time, and it's 17 beads wide. So now we will drop down. So we're going to go, the next 2 rows are going to have 16 beads. But you're not going to have to really count. So we're going to use our tray. I'm going to pick up 4. Beads. I'm going to push them all the way down to there, and this is how we're going to turn around. Okay, so this is when the brick stitch starts. So you can see there's 4 beads here. So we're going to push those all the way down, a thread bridge. So what does that look like? But pretend like there's another spool over here that this is going into. This is the thread bridge. So this little loop between this bead and this bead is the thread bridge. So you can see them on here, but they're very tiny. I can try and zoom in the rest of the way. I'm not sure that that's going to help. But just think of it like the loop at the end, the openings of the beads between the 2 beads. So we're starting with 4 seed beads. We're going to go down and we're going to go underneath, not the first little thread bridge, which is between these 2 beads, but the second one, these 2. Now, if you wanted to keep 17, you would go through the first one. But since we're going down, we're going to go through the second one. So that's important to keep in mind. So we're just going to pick up that little ladder chain that we've made, and we're going to put it through that thread bridge between, this would be columns 1, 2, so columns 2 and 3 on this end. And that's going to pull that into a square. Then we're going to go back up through, for this row, it'll be the 3rd and 4th beads we added. we're going up through the third and fourth beads we added for this seed bead row, which was 4 total, and then back down through seed beads 1 and 2. So we went up through these 2. Now we're going back down through these 2. See that there? Back down through those 2. And you have to constantly pull it tight. So the easiest way to keep it tight is, I know it's harder to see that way, is to put your finger on there to make sure it pulls tight. And then we're coming out these 2, so we're going to go back up through these 2. So the third and fourth that we put on, we're going to go back up through the third and fourth that we put on for these rows that will be 16 wide. And we're just going to pull that all the way through so that we're coming out the top, so that it sets us up coming out the top to pick up 2 more beads. So now we'll do that again. We'll start with our 2 beads. We'll pull those all the way down. We'll go, so we went through the second thread bridge. Now we're going to go through this third thread bridge, which is right here. So I'll lift that up, put it under the third thread bridge. Pull that down all the way until it's tight. And we're going to go back up through the 2 beads that we just put on. And hold it here and put it back up through those 2 beads that I just put on. Make sure it stays nice and tight here. We'll hold that thread there. Pull it all the way back up through there until it's tight. You might have to push down on that to keep it tight. And then you're ready to add 2 more. So we're putting on 2. I like to go through the back, and so now we're on the 4th thread bridge. I like to go through the back, so I'll pick that up, put it through that 4th one there. You can see that's the 4th one. Pull it tight. And then hold that. I'm going to hold that there and see if you can see me going back through those same 2 beads I just put on. See if I can push this bead down onto the needle. Yep, there we go. There we go. Keep it tight. Pull it back up. Hold it steady. Hold it, pull it tight. And there we go. So we're going to do that all the way until we get to this last thread bridge, which will be through those first 2 beads that are at the end where your little tail is here. So it'll be between the first 4 beads that you put on. And we're going to keep adding 2 at a time until we get to the next row. And then we'll do the 4 at a time again. And we're doing just black for now. Don't have to worry about switching colors yet. So we're going through the back of the next little thread bridge here. Go through there. All the way. Pull it tight. You can see the 2 beads I just added are right here. We're going to hold that. See, I can get through one. It's hard to get through that top one without holding it with my finger, but there, I got through both. Pull it all the way tight. use my finger on the top to make sure it stays tight, and then we'll just do that all the way across until we get to this last thread bridge, and these 2 rows will have 16 beads wide. So I'm about to get to, you can see right here is that last thread bridge between this set of beads and this set of beads. I've already got my 2 black beads on here. So I'm going to pull those all the way down. All the way down. So they're down. I'm going to go from the back. I got to pick this up. Put it on my finger. Go in under that thread bridge. And then we're about to make a turn and go to the next 2 rows. I want to keep that bottom part tight, and I want to keep those 2 beads I just put on tight. Okay, so I am under that thread bridge, so I'm going to hold that right there. Go up through those 2 beads I just put on through both of them. Pull the needle out the other side. And then we're going to pull that tight, and you might have to put your finger on there just to get it tight. So that's also going to help tighten up this first end that you had here. Now we're going to go for the next 2 rows. So we're doing 2 rows at a time. We've got 17, 16. So the next 2 are going to be 15. So we're going to start with 4 beads again. Pick up 4 beads on the needle. Show you that. There's 4. We're going to skip. So right here, the first thread bridge. So we're going to skip that one and go here to the second thread bridge. So I like to go in the back because that keeps me working on one side. So I'm going to go underneath. Go between those 2 beads, pull the needle all the way through, pull those beads tight. It's going to form a little bit of a square there. You go back up through the 2 we just added, so the 2 right above there. So we go back up through these 2, the last 2 we just added. Up through those 2. So see, that's the last 2 that just got added right there. Pull the needle all the way through. Put our finger on there to keep it tight. And we're going down through the first 2 we added in this row. You can see that there, down through those 2. Pull that all the way through, and then back up through those, the last 2 that we added. So that'll get our thread in the correct position to add the next 2 beads. That's what we're doing. And then we just do the same thing we did on the last row. We want them to be kind of cinched together. We don't want a whole bunch of gaps in between the beads. That's why I keep using my finger to make sure that it stays tight. So then we're adding 2 beads at a time. Then we're going to go through the 3rd thread bridge here on this row from the back. I'll push that. It's easier to work with the more rows you have, actually, because it starts staying more taut once you have more rows on there. So I'm under that thread bridge, pull that all the way. I'm going to place my finger on the thread, make sure it stays tight in there, and then I'm going to go back up through those 2 beads that I just put on. Push that needle all all the way up through there, pull it on this side, through there, pull it all the way, hold it, keep it tight. And then we're going to do that until we get to this last thread bridge here. All right, so I finished. Now we have 6 total rows, 2 with 17, 2 with 16, and 2 with 15 wide. So now is when we're going to start adding the orange beads. So we will go ahead and start this off the same with 4 black beads. We're going to go through the back under this second thread bridge, which is right here. We're going to hold that down, pull the needle all the way. Then we'll go back up through the last 2 that we just added, which are right above it. Sometimes maybe this is helpful to keep the bead in line. And pull that needle all the way through again so it comes out. Well, pull the thread because the thread came off the needle. So we're going all the way up. We're going to pull it tight to rethread the needle. Just rethread that really quick. There, I think I got it. Yeah, I got it. Okay. That was not too bad. And then we're going to go back down through the first 2 that we just added here. So we're going down through those 2 like that. You can see the needle coming out there. Push that down. Pull that all the way tight. Pull that thread all the way tight, and then we're going to go back up through the second 2 that we added, so the 3rd and 4th one that we just added, which are directly over the thread bridge that you connected to, or that you looped under. So I'm just trying to get this bead to cooperate there. Got the needle through. You can see it's coming through right here. I'll put my finger on there for just a second so that I can make sure that this thread is tight. Okay, so we're gonna do 2 next. They're also gonna be black beads. So we got 2 all the way down under the 3rd thread bridge here. Pull that needle all the way tight. Hopefully the thread doesn't come off the needle this time. And then we're going to go back up through them. Just hold it right here. There we go. Got it. But you can see it came a little bit loose because I've got a thread loop here now. So I'm going to take this and pull it tight. Now I've got my needle through, so I'm going to pull it all the way through. And then put my hand on there. Make sure it's tight. The next 2 will also be black. Both. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 sets of 2 beads in. And this is where we're going to start adding the color. So it's important to remember that when you're looping through, they're going to be, so the first bead you put on is actually going to be up here. And the second bead you put on is going to be down here because you're pulling them down in a loop. So the first bead I add is going to be orange, and the second bead I add is going to be black. So I added an orange, and a black, because when I loop through, I'm going to go under, I'm going to go underneath that thread bridge right here. I'm going to pull that needle all the way tight, like that. It's going to see how it puts the orange one on the top, even though I added it first. This is starting to make our pumpkin pattern. I'm going to go back up through both of those beads that we just added. I can push that orange bead over with this. I got it through both. Keep that thread here tight. So the bottom of our pumpkin is going to be flat because that's how a jack-o'-lantern sits. So we're going to add orange, black. We're going to do the same thing, and we're going to do this 6 times for the bottom of the pumpkin. All right, so the rest of this, so like we have 4 here, 4 sets of beads here. We're going to have 4 sets of beads on this side that are all black. So we're back to 2 black until we start. So they'll all be black until we start the next row. Okay, so I went to the next rows and I've added 3 sets of 2 beads. So now we're ready, and the next 2 beads are both going to be orange based on the pattern. So I'm going to pick up 2 orange beads. We're just doing the same thing. So next we're going to have an orange one on the bottom and a black one on the top. So we'll add the black one first because it does create that loop where whatever you put on first is going to end up being above whatever you put on second. So now we're going to loop down through that, go under that thread bridge right there, pull that tight. So this is going to start to be the jack-o'-lantern's mouth. That's why we're adding the black in this area, is to start to look like a little jack-o'-lantern. The next one is going to be opposite. So we're going to have orange first and then black. We want the black bead on the bottom instead of on the top. We're going to pick up our thread bridge underneath there, not tying a knot, so keep that out of the way. Pull it all the way down, and then go back up through. So the next 3 are going to be like this, orange first and then black. And then we're going to go back to, so we were doing orange first, then black. Now we're doing black first, then orange. So it's even with the other side. So it'll be similar to this right here. To wrap around your other beads. Pull it tight. So it does get easier the more beads you have because you have more to hold on to. Now we're back to 2 orange. Now we're back to 2 black beads. 1, 2 on the needle. Goes all the way down. And then we'll just finish this out with black from here on until the end of this row. You can start to see this jack-o'-lantern take shape. I've already added the 2 here. Okay, so we're adding 2 orange. Then next we're gonna do, we want black on the bottom, so we're gonna do orange and then black, because when we go through, when we go under that thread bridge, the black one's gonna be on the bottom. So that'll finish off the mouth. Then we're doing 2 orange. The next 2 will be part of the nose. So we're gonna switch it up again here in just a second. You can start to see that pumpkin jack-o'-lantern mouth take shape. We're just repeating the same steps, just looking at the pattern to see what colors. So now we're going to want black on the top row, which is this way. So I'm actually looking at the bottom here. So this is the mouth, and we're going to start the nose. So we want black up here on this newest row we're putting on. So we're going to do black, then orange, because the black will end up being on the top of that pattern. So we'll do that twice. So now we'll do black and then orange again for the other half of the nose. So the next 2 are going to be the same as the other side. So we're doing 2 orange. And then it's going to be the same as the other side again. So we're going to do orange, then black to finish the jack-o'-lantern's mouth. And then we're going to do like the other side again. So next we'll have 2 orange, and then we'll finish out this row with these 2 orange to finish off the pumpkin. And then we'll have 2 black and 2 black again. I'm just pulling it tight, and then I'm just going to finish out with 2 black like this side here on this side. You can see the jack-o'-lantern face starting to take shape. So we have the full mouth now and the start of the nose. now we're ready for orange already. So we're gonna do 2 orange. Now we're gonna start the eyes. So on this side here, which is down in the camera. So on that side's where we want our black to be for the eyes. So gotta put black and then orange. We're gonna do that twice for each eye. Black and then orange again. We'll finish off this eye. We're doing 2 orange for the between the eyes. And then we're back to black and then orange for the other eye. We're going to do that twice. Black and orange. And then we're back to 2 orange like on the other side here. Finish out this row like we did on the other side with two black and then 2 black again. So then you can see I already added the 2 on this end and then added 3. So the 4 that we start with to start a new row and then another 2 for the next one. So we have 1, 2, 3 columns of black. We'll do black first and then we'll do orange. 2 orange, 2 orange. So we got 2 orange there, and then we're going to do 2 more orange, and then we're going to do black and orange like we did over here. We're going to do black and orange. Now we're ready for finishing out this row with all black. So I went ahead and added 4. So the 4 at the start and then 2 more sets of black on this row. And then the next row is actually going to be 2 green. I didn't get these out at first just because you only need 2. So we'll pick up the 2 green beads. This is going to be your pumpkin stem. We'll finish off our pumpkin and then we'll go finish out this row with 4 more sets of 2 black. Now I'm just going to finish this out with all black, and then we're going to go all the way up until we get to 3 beads in our rows. So now we are at, so the ones with the green, those rows were at 8. These are at 7. We're at 6, but we're getting really short on our thread. So we're just going to work this thread into these beads. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2, work it into the center here. So our thread is getting really short. It's also going to make it very hard to keep it right here in front of the camera because the thread is getting so short. So we're just going to add those two on like normal. I'm going to go back down through the two before that. And I'm going to start working that thread into the rows below. So it came out here. We're going to go in to the next lower two. And you're just going to want to work that thread back and forth through the beadwork that you've already done. So right here, I'm going to go down through those two, or the two below. So this is the row I'm working on. It's going to have 6. The row below that's going to have 7. So I'm in the row below that has 7, right above the green stem row. Going to go up, pull my needle down a little further. I'm going to go down through the next two in that row below. I'm going to go up through the next two, down through the next two. You just want to zigzag it back and forth through there till you find a good spot. I'm going to go about right here. So not the very end, but the second from the last. And then I can just pick up one of those thread bridges like I've been doing. But this time I do want to tie a knot. So I'm going to go back through the loop that I just made with the needle. So you can see I didn't pull it all the way tight. I left a little loop here. I'm going to put the needle back through the loop. And then I'm going to pull it tight. That's going to create a knot. Then I'm going to go back under through that thread bridge again. I'm going to do that twice to solidify the knot. Leave a loop, go back through the loop. And then I'm going to pull that tight to create a knot. Then I can cut this thread. Then I can measure more thread and rethread the needle. And then we can finish off this until we get up to 3 rows. So I'm just using a regular pair of scissors. I'm going to get all the way as close to as I can to that knot that I just made. And not cut the knot, but cut just above the knot. You can see there, well, you may not be able to see, there is just a little tiny bit of the end, but this thread that I had left is not enough to work with. And we're going to do the same thing on this end. We're just going to thread this end, work that through, tie it in a knot, and then cut it off. So now I've worked that thread in on this end and on this end and cut it off. Now I'm going to start here where the thread bridge is. I don't have any beads yet. I'm going to tie this in where I need it to be in first. Let's see. It'll be best below these 2 beads. So I'm going to tie the knot below these 2 beads. The last 2 that I just put on that thread bridge that I went under for those 2. So just tie that in a knot basically. And just do like a regular over, under, and through. This is our long side where our needle is. This is our short side. One short side over the long side. Tie knot. I'm going to go ahead and go up through these beads because I don't want to cut the long end and I don't want to cut the thread bridge. I want to make sure I know exactly what I'm cutting. So I want to get this long piece out of the way. So pull that tight. Then I can go ahead and add my 2 beads and get this long piece over a little bit out of the way. But now we can tell the difference between our long thread and our short thread because our long thread is going to consistently get further away. snip right as close as I can. That's done. And then I'll just finish this 7 wide. We're going to go up until we only have 3 wide. All right, so I went ahead and did the first 2 rows of 3. But instead of going down to 2, we want to make 10 total rows of 3. So since we're making 2 rows at a time, that's going to be 5. Because we're doing double rows. So we've got 2 already, so we're going to do that 5 more times, but it's going to be a little bit different. So it is important on this one, because we are loose right here where we're going to be using the thread bridge. We're going to go through the first thread bridge. So ordinarily we would skip the first thread bridge here between these 2 beads, and we would go to this one to go down to 2. But we don't want to go down, so we want to go through the first thread bridge, and then we're adding 4. We're doing it exactly the same as we would. We're holding it tight. I have to hold it right here so the beads don't slide through the last row, because those are the 2 that I just put on, so they're looser than they normally would be if we were going to skip this thread bridge. And we're going to go back through those 2. We're going to try and keep it as tight as we can on this other end here. Back through those 2. Don't pull your needle off. Make sure your rest of your earring is on the same side you're working from. Hold that tight. Pull it tight, and then we'll go back through the other 2, which are these 2 here at this end. Back down through those, just like we normally would when we're adding 4 at the beginning of the row. The only difference, to keep the same number of beads, is you don't skip the first thread bridge. You don't go to the second thread bridge, you go through the first thread bridge. Pull that tight, then go back up through the ones that will become the middle of that row. I have to lift it up a little bit so I can push that back through those 2 beads to keep them aligned on the sides of the camera. Then we're just gonna do like we normally would. We'll add 2. Now this is when we'll use that last thread bridge, the second thread bridge here, right there. So we'll go through there. And we're just gonna do this. So we've got, that'll make us have 4 rows. We want to have 10 total. So we'll do this 3 more times, going through that first thread bridge instead of the second thread bridge, so that we keep 3. We're just going to keep doing that where we don't skip a thread bridge. We're going to go through both the thread bridges until we get to 10 total rows, so 3 more times. Okay, so you can see I did finish out where now I have 10 rows of 3 beads wide. So now this is, you got your little jack-o'-lantern smiley face at the bottom. I've been working from bottom to top. So this first row here, this top row, we're going to connect to the 9th row of 3 beads. So we'll flip it over. We're already coming out of this last bead here. So we're going to not do the first one. We're going to do this one above it. We're going to go down through that one. And that's going to cinch that last row we just put on there down. Now we're going to go back up through, so we're still on that 9th row, back up through the middle bead on the 9th row. Out the top there. So we're going out through the middle bead on the 9th row. of 3. See, that's pulling it down. Then we're going to go back up through the center bead on the first row here. Through here. So like this is the hardest part. And you can always pull it tight at the end. We're going to go back up through that one, the middle bead in the first row. Back up through there. Back down through the last one on that first row. So the opposite end of where we started. Facing down towards our pumpkin. And then we're gonna go back down through that 9th bead. And then we're gonna pull that tight. So it makes this little loop. And then that's where we're gonna put our jump ring on, is through this loop. So you can go back and forth through those a few times to make sure it's nice and tight. Good enough. I'm gonna go back down through the last one on this end, through that one. Pull that through. And then you'll just weave it in and out like we did whenever we tied it off last time, just to secure this thread. We won't be using this thread again. So you can actually go through several beads this time so that you can get down to a point where you can weave it in to the design and then cut that thread off, tie a knot, cut the thread off. Then I'll go back up through the next 2 in the center there. My cat has decided to be in the video. Let me move him. Let me refocus. So I'm just gonna weave that through this row and then tie it off. Back down through this one. So I'm on the row with 4 in it. Just to secure this thread, just to make sure that that little bit there stays nice and tight together, creating the loop. And you can do it as many times as you feel like you need to for it to be secure, but then you can take one of those thread bridges, go through, leave a loop, so I'm on this side of that thread bridge. I'm going to go above it, go back through my loop, and that's going to tie that off into a knot right there. So I got a little knot there. I'm going to do it again, go on the bottom of that thread bridge there. Again, I'm in the row that has 4, the second bead from this side. Go back above the thread bridge. Go back through the loop. And then just pull that tight. And now I can cut that thread off there. So you will want to try and cut it as close as you can to the beads without cutting the knot that you just created. So there's that. I'm sure you've seen me use jump rings on my other videos. You can use 2 sets of pliers. You can also use your fingers. So just hold one side stationary. I'm going to do that with my right hand. And you can pull the left side open. So the left side's open. It's already, we go ahead and put our hook on there. Open it as wide as you need it. Slide it through those beads. And then just get that opening at the top. Push it closed with one side, hold the other side stationary, and then you've got your hook on there. So all that's left now is just to add the fringe at the bottom. I went ahead and took off the jump ring and the French hook for the earring so that it doesn't get in the way. I went ahead and measured out another length of thread, and I'm going to tie that thread on here. So we're at the top of these first 2 beads here on the bottom. So we're going to add our fringe using this thread. So we're just going to tie that on the same as we did previously when we added thread up here. So we're going to tie one, cross it over, go through the loop, tie 2 knots. And then we're going to cut that piece off. So I am just going to go ahead and cut that piece as short as I can. And we don't need that extra bit. So the reason I tied it here is because we want to go down through those 2 seed beads in that area. So we want to put our needle, go through those 2 seed beads, so you can see I'm coming out the bottom there. Pull that all the way through, and this is where we'll start adding our fringe. So for our first, it's going to be 17 beads. So we're just going to increase by, so the first row is going to be 17 beads. 8 orange, we're going to put them all the way down there. 1 black, and then we're going to decrease. The red is going to be 7 instead of 8. So every row, you're going to have 1 more orange bead than you have red beads. So 7 red, and then we're going to end with black. So we're going to have 1 black. And each row is going to increase the orange and the red by 1 bead. So we'll have a total of 19 beads on the next row. So you pull those all the way down. You're going to leave the black one out. So the last one you won't go back up through. So you're going to leave the bottom one out, and then you're going to go back up through all of those red, the middle black, and the all the orange beads all the way up through. So I think it's coming out the back here. So we're going to pull that needle through there. We want to keep this as close to the top as we can. So we'll hold that thread there, pull that all the way through. So that's going to stabilize this first row of your fringe. You're going to go back up through those 2 in the 2 bottom rows of 17 of your actual earring. So you'll go up through those. Sometimes you might need a thimble, or sometimes I use my scissors to push it up through there. You're going to go all the way up through there. That's going to secure that fringe to the bottom of the brick stitch earring that you just made. And then you're going to go down through the next 2 in that earring here. So the 2 beside that there, you're going to go back down through there, and then you're going to increase the orange beads and the red beads by 1. So we had 8 orange. So now we're going to have 9 orange and 8 red. Push all those down. 1 black. Black's going to stay the same. It's It's always going to be one in the center and one at the end. And then we're going to have 8 red. Then you're going to put on your last black bead, 1 black bead for the ends like this. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to push that black bead out. We're going to repeat this until we get to the 9th row, which will be center, because we have 17 total across from our ladder stitch. Go back through our second set of beads in our original ladder stitch. Okay, see, it's cooperating. Back up through those 2. Sometimes you might need a pair of pliers to pull it, depending on how thick your thread is. That's why the nylon thread is really good. You can see that fringe starting to take shape, and then we're going to go in the 3rd set, go down, and then we're going to increase by 1 again. And we're going to keep doing this until we get to the 9th set of beads in the very center of our ladder stitch. We're going to keep increasing by 1 orange and by 1 red until we get there. And the total for the longest one, which will be in the center, is going to be 33 total beads. Okay, so now we're all the way. I just put on the 8th one, so now I'm going to put on the 9th one. We've worked our way all the way up from starting at 8 orange and 7 red to starting at 16 orange. So I'm going to add our 16 orange. 16, our 1 black in the middle. There's that. And then we're at 15 red because it's always 1 less than the orange. Our 1 black for the end, and then we're going to start going down in beads. So it just slides on the needle. So same process, just leave that last black bead out. Now see, our needle is much shorter than our fringe, so you may have to go through as many as you can. Try to get up to at least the black one here. Ooh, I made it past the black one. Then I'm all the way up here, so it's okay to go ahead and pull that through. And then just pick up the rest of them. Just hold that thread so you don't get some kind of weird loop in there. Go ahead and start pulling it through as much as you can, and then just make sure you go back in where you left off. So right there. All the way up through our 2 in our original ladder here. And that's the center. So this is row 9 of our original ladder. And like I said, if it gets hard to pull through, I just have a multi-tool here. I just use the plier part of the multi-tool, and I'll just yank on that needle a little bit. You don't want to yank on it hard, and you want to keep your design kind of flat if you can, so that it doesn't pull the thread weird when you do pull, if you need to use the pliers. So that's our center one there. So that's the longest one. Now on this side, we're going to basically, the 10th line of fringe, if you will, is going to match this 8th line of fringe. So we're going to go back down through our 2 in number 10 in our original ladder. I'm going to pull that all the way down, and then we're just going to refer back to what we did on the 8th one. So on the 8th one, and it should be 1, now we're descending. So we had a total of 16 orange, 1 black, and 15 red. So now we're going to have 15 orange and 14 red. And we're going to keep our black 1 and 1. So you just do that all the way until you get to the end. Okay, so I just put on the last part of the fringe, and you can see we have our jack-o'-lantern pattern and our fringe. So then we'll just do the same thing. We'll work this last little piece of thread back up into the pattern, tie it off, and then I will put the jump ring and the French hook back on for the earring. So that's it. And then you'll just do the exact same thing for the other earring. And then you'll have a pair of Halloween themed jack-o'-lantern earrings. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more jewelry tutorials.